Hello, hello. My name is Bennett Walcher. Uh, New for doing this voice recording thing, so you'll have to bear with me. My proposal project is on understanding the influences to judge biases in athletic competition. Okay, so for some introduction, typically sports that require a judging panel can often receive high criticism from spectators, athletes, and coaches. With that, as we all know, we've seen sports like the Olympic diving and gymnastics where we see that they get scores and we don't really know how they get them or why they're so low or why so high. And it's very easy to speculate why that's happening, and I'm going to help pick through that a little bit. Also some background information for judging panels that they range from typically 3 to 7 plus people. So if we're talking about NCAA Division 1, 2, or 3 on small dual meets for swimming and diving, typically you're going to have only 3 judges. Then when you get to, say, national competitions, you get to about 7 people, and even more when you get into the Olympic Games. Now, before continuing, I want to share that biases of anything may arise from a multitude of factors, and not one sole influence is the only attributor. So, as I go in depth further on in this, it is important to know that while I talk about one bias, I'm talking about just that one bias and not a combination of them all, because typically most biases are kind of blended to make the scores that people get. Yeah. Anyway, so the purpose of this proposal is to examine previous studies and use personal reflection and content analysis to understand and determine the major influences of bias for judges in athletic competitions. To help out the background, kind of share, is one of my sources from Emerson and Seltzner. This study was an assessment of judge bias that occurred in diving for the 2000 Olympic Games. He actually had 2 studies of this. He had one that was in 2008, and that one was how they were they actually found data and compared means of how the biases of different judges were indicated. And then he made another one, a qualitative study, this 2011 one, where he actually assesses and questions that the winner of the Olympic Games for diving shouldn't have been the person who it was. And now for another study by Hoy in 2007. This one found that when judges received a source of feedback, whether positive or negative, they tend to conform to that feedback they had. So they had people watch videos of girls doing gymnastics routines. So they'd play the video and they'd have some positive commentary, and then the judges would score. And then they had another group of people where they'd have the same video and they'd have negative commentary and then have the judges score. And it showed significant separation between the positive and negative feedbacks, indicating that conformity exists based on the feedback they were receiving. Okay, so my research questions and research bias. My first research question is, what are the major influences for judges to be biased? And then, number 2, are there methods to minimize these biases? Okay, now a bit about for the bias. So I'm going to be using reflection in my proposal, so that's going to mean that I need to highlight my own personal bias on the topic, mainly so I can further explain certain topics, and also kind of you can get a sense of where I'm coming at and so forth. Some also biases are like gender, age, socioeconomic class, ethnicity, so on and so forth, because from each nation you could have totally different opinions about judging biases. And for me, I am a male, 23, middle-class college student, and I'm white. And yeah, one of the biggest biases is for me is that I am a diving coach and a past competitor. So I am in with the competition, and I know the culture of the sport, and I have myself been on a judging panel. So I have, yeah. The last bias that I want to point out is the research that I'm using for my proposal. The research that is selected supports my conclusion, and yeah, that in itself is already a bias. So some review of literature that is in my proposal. Like I started out in the beginning, Emerson and Seltzer for 2011, and they also had the 2008 one where they found out that nationalism was occurring in the 2000 Olympic diving games. And again, they base this off of comparing the judge scores from an average. And again, I have Hoy for 2007, maybe it's Hoy, who knows. But yeah, they did the video analysis for feedbacks. Now, some new ones that I will be discussing in my proposal are Ansorge in 87 and 78. In 87, this person actually found that there was high levels of nationalism as well, but this was in gymnastics competition, in national competitions. And his second one that he has in 78, he found that in gymnastics competitions, whatever athlete whatever order they are in for competitions, so whether they go first, second, last, or if they compete in the middle, is actually gonna in itself have its own bias in what the judges give their scores. So if typically a person who is in the beginning are gonna get lesser scores, and you save the best for last, and the higher caliber athletes will be at the end, so they're expecting to throw out bigger numbers. So you can kind of see that. And for Shear and Ansord and Howard in 83, this one goes off of how it's in the best interest of fairness of the sport that biases are at its lowest. So they discuss how prior knowledge of the athlete that the coaches know. So if like a judge has past knowledge of an athlete that they're watching, they're typically going to be favorite towards that athlete, and therefore giving them an unfair advantage in competitions. And the same kind of goes for Plesner in 2005. And some highlighted themes that come out of all of my review of literature that I will be discussing are, as you can see, nationalism, favoritism, conformity to feedback, prior knowledge, and the athlete's order for performance. Alright, so my methods, it is a qualitative design. My data collection and analysis, I will be coding keywords used within qualitative sources. So some of those review of literature in the back, I pick through those and figure out exactly what they are saying, where their biases are coming from. And then I also use the actual findings of biases in quantitative studies. This is more about like using the feedback. So for content analysis, this is a section that I will be using because I am a diving coach, and I had female athletes, 5, that competed last season, and I will use their information to kind of use the same thing that Ansorge did and get an average of their scores and see exactly how or where the biases are coming, and if they are. And then I will also go into my personal experiences and kind of say that most judges coach their own athletes and have different backgrounds. So I have been with coaches um, who used to dive for D1 or D3, and now they're all in D2. So then you have judges who score very, very low, or you have judges that score very, very high, and that sort of stuff. Then I've also seen that there are people who pay attention to body type and how they execute their dives. So typically, um, a really good diver is going to be short and they're going to be small, so they can flip fast and they can enter the water smoothly and with minimal splash. So a tall, lanky person, just because it looks a little bit bigger or more awkward for them to do it, they're going to give them lower scores, but they can still execute the dive perfectly fine. Yeah. And then this kind of goes along with conformity and favoritism, is likability. There are definitely some athletes that try to get to know the judges or the coaches so they get liked, and therefore playing on their advantage and getting liked. Alright, so reflection and conclusion. My studies indicate that there is indeed bias occurring in athletic competitions and can sway the finishing places of athletes. And there are many influences found, but few, if not no, solutions for minimizing them. So for my conclusion, I decided that the major influences determined are nationalism, favoritism, prior knowledge, and conformity. Then I wanted to continue to say some suggestions for future research, or strategies to minimize biases would be to have completely random judge panel or strictly officials and not have coaches be part of the judge panel, and then also possibly having closed off scoring / spectating, where they will be blocked off. You can't see what other scores, and you can't be hearing the commentary of other people. Those types of studies would be interesting to see, and I'd love to see what happens. And these are my references. Thank you.